Hey, this is Rick Casellas from exercisesforinjuries.com. Today I have another interview for you. I haven't done one of these in a while, and I got to get back on track on doing these. But I've got Tyler Bramlett, and you've seen Tyler Bramlett a number of times on exercisesforinjuries.com, and I've also done interviews like this with him. And now what I wanted to talk to Tyler about is, training at high intensity, but doing it correctly, avoiding common mistakes, and staying injury free. So Tyler, for the people that do not know who you are, I'll get you to briefly introduce yourself, Tyler.
Well, why don't you know who I am? That's what I need to figure out. Well, no, okay, so Tyler Bramlett, GarageWarrior.com. I run a site that teaches people how to look, feel, and perform their best using basically movement progressions and just the kind of latest stuff that we find that really works well for people. Background is just grew up fat kid who thought diet soda was a health food, and ended up transforming my body in my life through a series of meeting lots of different coaches, working with lots of different people, and really finding my own philosophy on what it means to train people and to train them to become a strong, healthy, fit. So Here I am.
Yeah, and there you are. Now, so there's a group of people out there that believe that going for a walk is going to help them reach their fitness goals. And for some people that might be the case, but for the vast majority of people, they need to add some sort of intensity to what they do.
Sure.
So maybe you can kind of explain, why people need to add that intensity and how they can kind of progress up to that doing that intensity in order to reach their health and fitness goals.
Right. Well, I think that's a great question, Rick. I think a lot of people don't talk about that. And actually, it's interesting because a lot of people talk about intensity, but they don't talk about what it means to develop intensity or to have intensity actually elicit a body transformation. So there's almost like a precursor question to that, and that is, why intensity? There's people say, just do this exercise, or just do this routine, or do this percentage rate, or walk for X amount of miles, or what's the difference between an ultramarathoner and a sprinter? There's all these questions in your mind. And I want people to really realize that this isn't as complicated as they may think it seems, right? And the reality is, it all comes down to adaptation, right? You do something with your body, and your body adapts to make that easier. It's really that simple, right? So if you're going to go out there and you're going to jog for long distances, your body is going to adapt to make jogging at long distances easier. Generally, what this means is you only keep enough bone density to jog at the speed that you're used to jogging at. You only keep enough muscle to jog at the speed you're jogging at. You keep enough fat to use as fuel when you're in those higher echelons of length, right? So people don't realize that sometimes when they're doing something like jogging, they might be sending their body the opposite signals that they want it to be actually being sent, right? Because people typically start running when they want to lose fat or whatever, not realizing that they can get somewhere, but they're not going to get extremely far. Take the flip side of it. Let's talk about the sprinting scenario, right? This is kind of always your debate, sprinters intensity versus joggers length. The sprinters, they're going as fast and as hard as they can, and they're sending their body a simple signal, right? How do I run as fast and hard as I can? Well, let's increase the bone density, let's increase the muscle mass, let's increase the glycogen uptake, so the amount of carbs you can eat and use during your workouts, and let's decrease the body fat because it's just weighing us down and preventing us from going fast. So I think that the adaptation is the first key, is really understanding that adaptation is the key here. What are you doing to elicit an adaptation, and what is that causing in somebody's body? So with regards to intensity, we just talked about jogging versus sprinting. And obviously the sprinting is more advantageous when it comes to lean muscle mass, burning body fat, so on and so forth. So with this intensity piece of the puzzle, the biggest problem people have is they don't quantify how they escalate intensity, right? And the example I always like to give is, I've had several clients tell me this. They say they went out and bought one of these popular infomercial workout products. And typically you'll see these workout products have beginner guy, an intermediate guy, an advanced guy, and maybe like an extreme guy or something. And they just say, follow along to whoever you resonate with the most. Just follow along and try to do better. Well, the issue that I have with this is, a beginner will start following on the beginner and most likely get married to the beginner exercises, and they'll constantly be thinking to themselves, I'm not an intermediate guy or an advanced guy. You almost get married to the concept of who you are, right? Like, I'm a beginner, and you can stay like that, a beginner, for months or even years, and in reality, that should be enough time for you to progress from beginner to intermediate, and so for some people, from intermediate to advanced as well. And so I think people they kind of lose on this one when they give you intensity based on like these really simple kind of steps versus intensity based on a progression that is logically thought out. Okay. And that's where I think intensity really comes into play. You can do intense activities safely. There's a lot of things that you can do safely. A simple example would be doing like jumping jacks to start out with. Let's say somebody's a complete beginner. If you're doing jumping jacks at a high rate and you have good form, your knees are tracking your toes and so on and so forth, you can make that an intense exercise. But an advanced person doing jumping jacks would be completely worthless, right? That's a good warm-up exercise. It's a good little kind of whatever, but it's not intense enough. The exercise is not intense enough. So where can we go from there? I mean, we could have them doing more complex things like burpees or doing jump squats or jumping rope, doing double unders and things like that. That is going to elicit the body transformation results they want, the strength results they want, the conditioning results they want, because the exercise is more complex, it uses more muscles and it taxes the nervous system more. So to me, when I look at intensity, I'm not thinking just about how many reps you can get in, what the load is. I'm also thinking about how complex the movement is, because the more complex it is, like I said, the more muscle fibers you recruit, which is basically going to give you better coordination, better strength. It's going to burn more calories in your workout and so on and so forth. So I hope that kind of made sense. I'm just trying to get to people that it's all about adaptation, and adaptation is all about making the things you're doing harder by looking at them from a different perspective than just like, oh, I just did 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off again for the 100,000th time using the same exercises, right? It's never going to work. You have to always escalate things, make them consistently harder, so you send those loud and clear signals to your body to tell it to transform.
Okay. And then how would you suggest that people can find that intensity level to start off with? So you talked about, like, some people, walking is a challenge and their cardiovascular system and their musculoskeletal system is kind of pushed to the max just from walking. While some people, I mean, they need to, literally sprint at a high level in order to challenge their cardiovascular system, musculoskeletal system, nervous system, and the rest of the systems in their body. So how would someone end up finding that right intensity for them?
Well, see, that's the beautiful part, Rick, is it doesn't have to be how do you find your intensity where you're at. It really has to be how do you plan your intensity to where you want to go, right? So let's say my max intensity right now is a brisk walk. Well, I've just found my intensity level. Right? So that's it. You just answered your own question. The person who can only do 10, squat thrusts without getting out of breath, well, that's their intensity level. They can do 10 squat thrusts without getting out of breath. The more important thing is to define where it is you're going, right? So let's say we're using the walking, running, sprinting example, right? Let's say this person goes, okay, I like the way that, 800-meter runners look. And a typical 800-meter runner can, do an 800-meter lap in, let's say 2 minutes and 30 seconds. And that's a pretty dang fast 800-meter run, right? So for that person, let's say they just trained by doing 800-meter walks. They just started with where they're at, right? And their first goal was just to get a metric on how long it took for them to briskly walk 800 meters, right? Let's say they do it and they end up at 9 minutes, right? Well, what's the progression there? The progression there is, okay, my first goal is to be able to do this in 8 minutes, right? And once they achieve that, my next goal is to be able to do it in 7, and then 6, and then 5, 4, 3, 2, whatever they're able to get to. And I like to get people to paint pictures for themselves, that end goal that is unbelievable to them, right? So if you can't do that, like I said, 2.5 minute, 800-meter run, that's a pretty solid speed for an 800-meter run. So paint a picture that sounds impossible to you right now, but then take it apart into several different steps. And if you take it apart into several different steps and you start achieving them just one small step at a time, that's when we see that sequential progress. And that's when we see people stay consistent with stuff, because they're achieving goals, not just making like these big pipe dreams and never actually getting there. So I think the big thing isn't really looking at where you start your intensity. You already know where you're able to start your intensity. It's what you're currently capable of doing. The more important thing is defining what it is that you want to be capable of doing, and then segmenting that into sequential steps so that you can go from point A to point B and along the way transform your body.
Okay. And so then, one of the common causes of injuries is intensity, and doing an intensity level that your body's not ready for.
Right.
Now, what are some ways that people can prevent getting injured at intensity?
Yeah, so like I talked about a little bit this before. We're talking about running, that's kind of intensity level. And we talked a little bit about exercises. And to me, that's more of a movement progression level, right? So when people do intense exercises, when people use intensity on exercises that are appropriate for their level of movement, they don't get injured, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So if you are able to do basic squats with perfect form Well, then have at it, go intense. You're probably going to be able to do that extremely safely. But let's take a person who has an okay body weight squat. Maybe they're not ready to move on beyond that. And some dumbass trainers like, we're going to do jump squats and jump lunges and all this stupid stuff where they're adding speed and they're adding explosiveness and they're adding more coordination and everything. And they're giving these people these exercises. Well, that's combining intensity with poor movement. And that's the problem. See, people think intensity is the problem. The problem is intensity combined with poor movement. So the way to think about this is to segment yourself into the appropriate movement category, right? One of my favorite exercises is the snatch, right? And people have probably seen Olympic lifters do the snatch, or maybe you've seen some functional exercise guys do a one-arm snatch with like a dumbbell or a kettlebell or something like that. That is a wonderful exercise, but it's not a beginner exercise, right? Nobody should get started on the one-arm snatch on day one. What I think they should get started on is, how about learning how to pick a weight up off the ground? So starting with something like a deadlift, maybe with two hands at first. And then the next step might be doing it with one hand. So you learn how to brace your core unilaterally rather than together at the same time. Then from there, maybe adding a little bit more of a explosive power to it, something like a swing or something along those lines. From there, moving it to a high pull. From there, finally moving it to a snatch. And where you fall in those categories as far as your movement skill is the exercise you can do intensely without risking getting injured. If you go above that, you risk the injury. And if you go below that, it's fine. It's fine as well. You can also use that as intensity. So to me, it's about finding out where you're at right now. Does your squat look good? Yeah, your squat looks great. Okay, now add a jump to it. Okay, your knees start wobbling from side to side and you start losing your midsection, right? Well, maybe you need to work on your jump squats with perfect form before adding intensity. It's always got to be form first, intensity second. I think people really mess that up a lot of the time.
Oh, good. I like that. Really like looking at the movement and the technique and making sure that's perfect, and then layering in everything else on it when it comes to, speed, load, coordination. I like that.
Yeah. Well, it's, like one of the common things I hear, Rick, is people always talk about running. Running hurts your knees, running this and that. And the reality is bad running hurts your knees, right? It's not, if you're running poorly, which the reality is, I always ask people to ask themselves this question. Like, if you go see a trainer and they're going to work with you on your squat, they're going to spend like weeks, maybe months. I would spend like a year on your squat probably, right? But how often do they teach you how to run? And to me, running is such a more sophisticated motor pattern than squatting. But nobody teaches people how to do that. So when I think it's a misnomer that people say running or sprint, I don't want to run or sprint because it hurts your knees or whatever. I think that's just because they run poorly and they need to go learn how to do that with proper motor function. Like I'm saying, it's not for everyone. I've had 4 knee surgeries. I'm not the biggest fan of running myself because I'm also not the best running technique guy. So I can, do things like rowing or cycling or doing more cross-training functional stuff to get the cardio I need in. But the point is, if you have perfect form, you're not risking injury. If you don't have perfect form, you're risking injury kind of regardless of the intensity.
I like that. That's good. Looking at the technique, because I think a lot of people, when we're doing the exercise of the movement, we think we're doing it perfect. Like we see it on the video. And then when you have someone else look at it, or when you have someone record you do it, it's definitely not the case.
It's not, and I think the sad thing, Rick, is a lot of trainers, you're one of the few out there who understands joints, movements, proper muscle firing patterns, things like that, because you've put in the time, you've put in the effort, you've learned a lot of this stuff. And the reality is, and I'm sure you know this because you've worked with so many trainers and stuff now, is that most of them just really don't understand how the human body's supposed to move. Where is the scapula supposed to be when the arm is overhead? What's your midsection supposed to do when you're in a push-up position? Where are your knees? Where's the weight distribution on your feet when you're doing squats and lunges? And those little tiny tweaks can make a huge difference in reducing somebody's risk of getting injured. And it's just something that it takes a lot of time. It takes a skillful trainer to be able to show you how to do that. And the sad truth is, like, a lot of people out there, they start training, they get married to their philosophy, and they don't actually further the education to the point where they actually understand physiology or human movement. They just kind of do what they got used to doing, and a lot of times it kind of sucks, to be frank.
Yeah.